So we're looking at wargaming tactics here. The idea of a refused flank. I'm going to be providing this scenario, this setup for us to imagine through the perspective of Battletech, an amazing war game that I love playing. And what brought this up was in a Battletech video looking at some tank designs and utilizing them correctly, or at least having that checklist of questions for yourself. I realized a couple of fundamental mistakes that I made utilizing one of these really heavy tanks on there. So this led into this idea of how I should have used it, and I should have used it as a refused flank. We covered that a little bit, but I thought, given that we were looking at some deployment options, you know what? This is my mistake is a great tactical exercise for all of us, myself included, to learn from. So I'm going to be talking some Battletech terms here. If you're familiar with them, you'll visualize them. I will also be explaining them a little bit. So if you're not familiar with Battletech, one, if you're listening to my channel, you need to play Battletech immediately. And two, if not the explanation, you can plug in your wargaming system. So here's the scenario. I am tasked with defending a city. It's a pretty large city. I've got some mechs, which are giant war robots. I've got a mix of light tanks and heavy tanks. I've got some infantry. I've got a good amount of combined arms. My opponent is representing the clans in Battletech. They're a faction that has more advanced technology, stronger units, quicker units, faster units, but they cost more battle value. In Battletech, battle value is one of the ways that you compute points, so you can kind of have a fair game, meaning, hey, we each select 6,000 battle value, we buy our toys, and we sit down and we play the game. And although we have different units, it equals about out. But every wargaming system has battle value, points, power level, squadron points, whatever on there. So I'm tasked with defending the city against the clans. Two of the units that I take are Behemoth heavy tanks. In Battletech, the tech level, Behemoth heavy tanks are 100 tons each. These are massive tanks. They have tons and tons of weapons, lots of armor. They could easily challenge and defeat a heavy battle mech in the game. I mean, the size comparison, these things are massive on there. They cost a lot in battle value. They do. But they're very potent on there, and they have a lot of other advantages to them. But they are slow. They are really slow. They are one of the slowest units in the game on there. And with the mission we were playing, so I took two Behemoth tanks, and the clans, I had control of the city. So that's good. I've got good vantage points. I've got good ambush points. I get to utilize cover, terrain, buildings. But to balance that out, the scenario was, I don't know which direction the clans are attacking. Are they going to attack from the left side, the right side, ahead of me, behind me? I don't know. So I have to make some choices on here. And the mistake I made was I put one Behemoth on the left side of the city, one Behemoth on the right side of the city. And as soon as I deployed out, I realized I made a mistake. But it's too late. We already deployed. I said I was done. I should have taken a second to really look, but I had a lot of units on there. What this means is when the clans came in and they attacked on one side, because naturally they're going to, even though they've got more advanced tech, they have less units, they are going to kind of look to force magnify and come in on one side. That means on one side of the table, I had a Behemoth tank that as it moved slowly, it could engage. The other one being on the other side of the table, moving 1 or 2 hexes a turn, it's going to take forever to get there. It's never going to get there. The battle's going to be over. And it pretty much was on there. So that means that the battle value that I spent on that tank, the points I spent on that tank, I might have well just tossed it off the table. I didn't get to utilize it. So that was the setup. The correct deployment for this mission would have been utilizing those Behemoth tanks and maybe some other units to set up what's called a refused flank. A refused flank in wargaming is we have a physical table, a gaming table, or hex maps, or a gaming mat For the most part, in a wargaming system, that represents the battlefield where you're fighting in the moment. Tactically and narrative-wise, there might be stuff happening to the left, to the right, behind you, in front of you, the table over. But you as a commander, this is what you're tasked with winning. This is the flashpoint. This is the action point on there. And in most wargaming systems, the edges of the table, you really can't go off the table. If you go off the table, the unit's lost, or the game ends, or just it's like the invisible wall. You can't break that wall. There are a couple of units that might. There might be a couple of rules that do that, but generally you can't. So refused flank means you take some powerful units and you load them on one side of the table. So now when your opponent comes in, so in this case of the city fight mission, I have control of the city. If I took those 2 behemoth tanks and put them on the left side of the table, that means if the clans come in on the left side, they got to deal with 200-ton powerful tanks that could easily scrap a mech. Do they want to do that? I mean, they're powerful, but they have less units on there. And if the behemoth tanks get lucky and can concentrate firepower and take out a clan mech or two, that's serious. That's serious. The opening couple of rounds of the game, that's massive on there. At best, if the clans do destroy the tanks, which they probably could, they're going to get chewed up. They're going to pay a heavy price. And again, the clans don't have the numbers in terms of what they bring to the table. So putting them on that side of the table, left side, right side, one side, whatever, loading it up on one side, I refuse that flank. That means the clan player, or optimally you'd say, well, I'm going to go in on the other side. Because if I go in on the other side of the table, then at least it'll take a while for those behemoth tanks to get over there. Where you deploy the refused flank, so I'm essentially, if it's unknown and I don't know where my opponent's going to come in on, I at least want to make it where they don't come in on that side. If I looked tactically at the terrain, the building itself, the buildings itself, the terrain, is there a part in the city that would not be advantageous for the clan mechs to enter? Maybe in the north corner, there's an open park, just an open grassland, maybe a few light trees, and it's surrounded by buildings, essentially a kill zone, where I can have all of my units in the hard cover, in the buildings, infantry swarming in those buildings, the ring of fire, and the clans come in. The first 2 turns of the game is them crossing literally an open park, a city park, and I'm going to blast them. So if I put the behemoth tanks on the opposite side of the table, away from that park, it forces them to now make a decision. Come in on the side with the behemoth tanks and deal with them. Maybe you got a plan, maybe you don't. Refused flank. Or say, hey, I'm going to ignore those behemoth tanks because they could scrap me, but now I'm literally walking 2 or 3 turns out in the open. There's no cover for me to go to. That would have been tactically the better maneuver, and I realized it as soon as I did. The question in terms of points, and this kind of works if you're thinking, well, refused flank is an interesting tactic, especially against a fast and fluid army. If you're looking at something like Warhammer 40K, my Samhan war host, Eldar, jet bikes, Vipers, wave serpents, I'm very fast, I'm very fluid. White Scar bikers, very fast, very fluid. Ravenwing, very fast, very fluid. They can start in the center of the table and in one turn be either on the left flank or the right flank their entire army. Refused flank is great against fast-moving armies. So their units might all be on the table, but if they're fast-moving, it's a great way to kind of funnel them into one area, so at least you can deal with them on there. Tactically, the question to ask is, okay, if I put those behemoths on that side of the table, on one side of the table, refused flank, that's if my opponent does not come in on that side, the battle value that it cost for those 2 tanks, I'm not utilizing, meaning I'm not shooting with those 2 tanks on there. I'm not actively making that battle value back with the opportunity to possibly scrap some of your units on there. So what that means is it worth the battle value? Does it buy me tactical advantages in return for sacrificing those 2 units? So it's not always about the big guns, even though 99% of my strategy is the big guns, because you can have your fancy plans, you can have your fancy mechs, you can have your tactica swing and dance. As soon as I start rolling those autocannon 20s and start rolling out the big guns and dropping hundreds and hundreds of real-time long-range missiles on there, things get real on there. It's not to say that you shouldn't have finesse, but not utilizing the points sometimes for the freedom or the tactica that it buys you on the table, it's not always about the killie.